Throw a stick, and the servile dog wheezes and pants and shambles to bring it to you. Do the same before a cat, and he will eye you with coolly polite and somewhat bored amusement. We must realize that man's nature will remain the same so long as he remains man. That civilization is but a slight coverlet beneath which the dominant beast sleeps lightly and ever ready to awake. To preserve civilization, we must deal scientifically with the brute element, using only genuine biological principles. I do not think that any realism is beautiful. It is no compliment to be the stupidly idolized master of a dog whose instinct it is to idolize, but it is a very distinct tribute to be chosen as the friend and confidant of a philosophic cat who is wholly his own master, and could easily choose another companion if he found such, and one more agreeable and interesting. Children, old crones, peasants, and dogs ramble. Cats and philosophers stick to their point. From my experience, I cannot doubt but that man, when lost to terrestrial consciousness, is indeed sojourning in another and uncorporeal life of far different nature from the life we know, and of which only the slightest and most indistinct memories linger after waking. But more wonderful than the lore of old men and the lore of books is the secret lore of ocean. I am disillusioned enough to know that no man's opinion on any subject is worth a damn unless backed up with enough genuine information to make him really know what he's talking about. In theory, I am an agnostic, but pending the appearance of rational evidence, I must be classed, practically and provisionally, as an atheist. I am essentially a recluse who will have very little to do with people wherever he may be. I think that most people only make me nervous. That only by accident, and in extremely small quantities, would I ever be likely to come across people who wouldn't. To the scientist, there is the joy in pursuing truth, which nearly counteracts the depressing revelations of truth. Atmosphere, not action, is the great desideratum of weird fiction. Indeed, all that a wonder story can ever be is a vivid picture of a certain type of human mood. The real lover of cats is one who demands a clearer adjustment to the universe than ordinary household platitudes provide. One who refuses to swallow the sentimental notion that all good people love dogs, children, and horses, while all bad people dislike and are disliked by such. It is only the forcible propagation of conventional Christianity that makes the agnostic so bitter toward the church. He knows that all the doctrines cannot possibly be true, but he would view them with toleration if he were asked merely to let them alone for the benefit of the masses whom they can help and succor. It would not be amiss for the novice to write the last paragraph of his story first, once a synopsis of the plot has been carefully prepared, as it always should be. Life is a hideous thing, and from the background behind what we know of it peer demoniacal hints of truth, which make it sometimes 1,000-fold more hideous. Fear is our deepest and strongest emotion, and the one which best lends itself to the creation of nature-defying illusions. The man or nation of high culture may acknowledge to great lengths the restraints imposed by conventions and honor, but beyond a certain point, primitive will or desire cannot be curbed. Plots may be simple or complex, but suspense and climactic progress from one incident to another are essential. Every incident in a fictional work should have some bearing on the climax or denouement, and any denouement which is not the inevitable result of the preceding incidents is awkward and unliterary. Indeed, there is much in pure humanitarian culture, as opposed to rigid scientific training, which encourages absorption in the affairs of mankind, and more or less indifference to the unfathomed abysses of star-strewn space that yawn interminably about this terrestrial grain of dust. My nervous system is a shattered wreck, and I am absolutely bored and listless save when I come upon something which peculiarly interests me. truth is of no practical value to mankind save as it affects terrestrial phenomena. Hence the discoveries of science should be concealed or glossed over wherever they conflict with orthodoxy. One can never produce anything as terrible and impressive as one can awesomely hint about. All attempts at gaining literary polish must begin with judicious reading, and the learner must never cease to hold this phase uppermost. In many cases, the usage of good authors will be found a more effective guide than any amount of precept. There are, I think, 4 distinct types of weird story, one expressing a mood or feeling, another expressing a pictorial conception, a third expressing a general situation, condition, legend, or intellectual conception, and a fourth explaining a definite tableau or specific dramatic situation or climax. No breed of cats in its proper condition can by any stretch of the imagination be thought of as even slightly ungraceful, a record against which must be pitted the depressing spectacle of impossibly flattened bulldogs, grotesquely elongated dachshunds, hideously shapeless and shaggy Airedales, and the like. Certain of Poe's tales possess an almost absolute perfection of artistic form, which makes them veritable beacon lights in the province of the short story. I could not write about ordinary people because I am not in the least interested in them. I am well nigh resolved to write no more tales, but merely to dream when I have a mind to, not stopping to do anything so vulgar as to set down the dream for a boorish public. Heaven knows where I'll end up, but it's a safe bet that I'll never be at the top of anything, nor do I particularly care to be. A dog is a pitiful thing, depending wholly on companionship, and utterly lost except in packs or by the side of his master. Leave him alone, and he does not know what to do except bark and howl and trot about till sheer exhaustion forces him to sleep. Very few minds are strictly normal, and all religious fanatics are marked with abnormalities of various sorts. What a man does for pay is of little significance. What he is, as a sensitive instrument responsive to the world's beauty, is everything. In writing a weird story, I always try very carefully to achieve the right mood and atmosphere and place the emphasis where it belongs. Write out the story rapidly, fluently, and not too critically, following the second or narrative order synopsis. Change incidents and plot whenever the developing process seems to suggest such change, never being bound by any previous design. I fear my enthusiasm flags when real work is demanded of me. There be those who say that things and places have souls, and there be those who say they have not. I dare not say myself, but I will tell of the street. The end of a story must be stronger rather than weaker than the beginning, since it is the end which contains the denouement or culmination, and which will leave the strongest impression upon the reader. The appeal of the spectrally macabre is generally narrow, because it demands from the reader a certain degree of imagination and a capacity for detachment from everyday life. Horror and the unknown or the strange are always closely connected, so that it is hard to create a convincing picture of shattered natural law or cosmic alienage or outsideness without laying stress on the emotion of fear. Searchers after horror haunt strange, far places, but are not the dreams of poets and the tales of travelers notoriously false. The reason why time plays a great part in so many of my tales is that this element looms up in my mind as the most profoundly dramatic and grimly terrible thing in the universe. Man's respect for the imponderables varies according to his mental constitution and environment. Through certain modes of thought and training, it can be elevated tremendously. Yet there is always a limit. For correct writing, the cultivation of patience and mental accuracy is essential. Throughout the young author's period of apprenticeship, he must keep reliable dictionaries and textbooks at his elbow, eschewing as far as possible that hasty extemporaneous manner of writing which is the privilege of more advanced students.